Hello, industry explorers. Welcome to another episode of our Job Seeker series where we help you land your next role. Today, we're really going to be diving into resumes. We're going to talk about applicant tracking systems and LinkedIn and the future of video resumes. My guest is Rob Cancilla. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So, can you tell our listeners what you do?
Sure. There's a few things in there. I'm an executive recruiter by day. I'm a resume writer and career coach on the weekends and in the evening, as they say. And I'm also an adjunct professor who teaches a public speaking class. So a little bit of everything. And then on top of that, kind of mesh that all together, I'm a content creator on TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, and soon to be YouTube, where I do a lot of career coaching, kind of job search, job interview prep, the kind of the full gamut, if you will, of job search and career advice.
That is amazing. And I love watching your TikToks.
Oh,
I know I've said that to you a couple times before, but I really do. So Rob does quite a few things with his content. He goes over resumes, he goes over interview tactics, he will look at people's resumes, or not resumes. Well, yeah, you do that too.
Resumes and LinkedIn profiles, yeah.
Yeah, but I love when you do the LinkedIn profile audits, especially of students, like students who are currently in college or grad students or people who are fresh out of college, because, the advice that you give them when you go through the audits is so invaluable. So it's so great to have you. Make sure you guys follow Rob on LinkedIn, and you can follow Rob on TikTok at Rob_Cancilla. Sorry.
Cancilla.
I'm from SoCal, so tortilla, Cancilla, tortilla, Cancilla.
I think I probably hear that at least once a day when somebody sees my name. It's either one or the other, so all good.
Yeah. All right, so let's just get right into applicant tracking systems. I'm super interested to know, what is it that makes these things work? What is the software doing?
Yeah, I mean, it is originally designed to help, essentially manage the intake of like resumes and applications, right? And make it very efficient and organized for, whoever's on the other end of that, HR, recruiter, hiring manager, whatever it may be. But it's designed to be an efficient system to help with that. And then if you think about like some of these big Fortune 500 companies, they can post a job. When I was working at Facebook, we would get 10,000 applications for a single role. And so it's just not humanly possible for these. I know, it's massive. I mean, Google, I've heard stories, Google gets like 100,000. And so a lot of times I hear people on TikTok will comment like, ATSs are for lazy, recruiters. And it's like, well, it's not even lazy. Like, there's just no human way to facilitate that much intake. So one is an intake, and then two, it's a filtration system. So it's designed to filter resumes based off a variety of different things. The most common one being keywords. Those keywords can be like the titles that you've had previously, or other kind of keywords that talk about different skills that you've done in the past. And so it's designed to organize and filter applications. So then eventually you get a subset of that group to a human who then reviews the resumes, in depth, if you will, or maybe not in depth, but reviews them and then gives kind of that next human filter to say, are these the people that we want to move forward in the interview process? And, for what it's worth, a lot of them are archaic. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I'm not for ATSs. I just know how to work around them, if you will. But a lot of them are pretty archaic, and they're older systems. They have bugs. They don't, it's amazing that my phone can scan my face and tell me who I am, but an application tracking system sometimes gets, skipped up with the smallest kind of detail. But it's the system that we work with. And 99 point something ridiculous amount of companies use ATSs. So, we could spend a whole session on talking about why they are where they are, but they're here and they're not going anywhere. So we got to kind of figure out how to work around them the best way.
Definitely. And I just did the math on that. If you received 100,000 applications for one role, for a human, not even to really look at the resumes, but for a human just to go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, if you spend 1 second on each of those resumes, you're spending 27 hours just doing that, and you're not even reading them. So there's, ATS filters certainly have their place in our world. But I want to know, how do you work around them?
Yeah, I mean, the shortest answer is, less is more, or simplistic is more, if you will. And in the sense of, I often get like, I want to stand out. I want my resume to be creative. I want it to look different. And the reality is, to get through an ATS, you actually want it to be as simple as possible, right? It's black letters on a white background, no images, logos, graphs, and nothing fancy. It literally should just be text, in a very simplistic format. I think a mistake a lot of people make is like text boxes, right? Well, they'll put a text box so they can, put a piece of information, that looks nice over here and those kind of things. ATSs can't read any of that stuff. So when there's a text box or a logo or a graphic, the system just doesn't know how to scan that information. And so ultimately what ends up happening is it scans your resume, and often it'll parse your resume out. Parse meaning it'll take pieces of information. It'll take your education section and it'll put it into an education box, and it'll take your experience and put it in an education box. And so when you start creating all these different things, you mess with the system, which then ultimately some information may not get parsed correctly or may not even be seen at all. And so you may have this great piece of information in this box or chart or whatever, and it doesn't get viewed. So that's in the simplest way I can say it is to do a simple, clean resume that has spaces, that has no text boxes, and allows the application tracking system to scan and parse out your resume.
That makes sense. Do you think there are places or instances in which a more graphic or a more unconventional resume is appropriate?
Yeah, I think in person, or if you're, networking, or you get introduced to somebody, right? And it's like, hey, I want you to meet my great friend who's this awesome product manager. I know you guys are looking, like, you guys should connect. Then I actually tell people you should have an ATS friendly resume, which on paper looks kind of boring, right? But then you should have this other resume that you feel like represents you, right? And maybe your brand and your style. And that's the one that you bring. Well, we don't go into interviews anymore right now, but when we actually start going back into offices and you have to hand somebody your, when you sit down with somebody, you're like, oh, do you have a copy of my resume? That's when you hand them that one that maybe has some more, pizzazz to it, or whatever you want to call it. But you should really have two versions. Now the content is the same, right? So like, what you say in those resumes should be the same, but how you present it can be very different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's almost like, we now have like B2B companies or B2C companies.
Yeah.
When it comes to being a job seeker, when it's H to H, human to human, that's when you can have the fancier looking, the more graphic looking resumes that, and there's so many different ways to approach those kinds of resumes, as far as like where things are placed and the little graphics that accompany like your skills and all those topics. So, and then we have the H2A, human to application, or H2 ATS, human to applicant tracking system, in which case simple is better. So I love that piece of advice that you shared with us. Now, okay, I have seen people give interesting advice, and I'm very curious to know what your opinion on this is. If you go into Microsoft Word, okay, and you do top to bottom, left to right, very easily readable, your resume. If you were to put in a space somewhere and have like a box and or you wouldn't even need a box, right? You just have the letters, the keywords, like not even sentences, but just keyword. Make it white so it blends in. So someone looking at it as a I guess as a PDF, it's not going to translate, huh?
No, I know this trick.
Would that trick work if you sent it as like a Word?
I did a video on this recently on TikTok, and it has like 350 or 400,000 views. I posted it this week. So in the HR like recruiting community, if you look at the comments, it's really funny because you'll see like job seekers be like, "I totally do this," and basically what you're talking about is you hide keywords, or the extreme is literally cutting and pasting the job description and hiding it in the resume by making it one font and making it white, and it's in the background. So this, honestly, it can work. However, the downside is if it doesn't work, and so some application tracking systems are set up to scan. So let's just say you didn't have the word project management as something that I can actually read on the resume, but then you put that in there, you hide it, and project management is a word that I have put in the ATS that I want it to be searchable and I want to show me where project management is. It'll highlight on your resume. It'll show me that there's something there. And so while I can't see it, all of a sudden now it identifies that it's there, and then I have to figure that out. I will tell you also, like, after, I reviewed thousands of resumes. What's that?
That sounds shady. Like, oh, something's highlighted and I can't see. What are they hiding from me?
if you get caught doing that trick, by the way, there's a lot of organizations that will blacklist you. So they'll put your name in a box and say that you are not allowed to apply for anything else. So to me, the risk
Good to
versus
know.
reward is not there. And so, at the end of the day, honestly, in my mind, the best scenario that you get is an interview. But like, if you don't have the skills and you have to cut and paste and sneak in this way, then
Yeah.
you're going to come out in the interview anyways that it's not there. So
Yeah.
it's an old trick. Most people know about it. I would say also skimming resumes. Not every word, but like I can tell pretty quickly if I set up the ATS and your resume comes in and I'm like, I don't see the words that I'm supposed to see here. Like it stands out to me pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. How do you, when you scan resumes,
Yeah.
how do you pick out things that stand out to you? Because if I have a very plain, the black text on the white spacing resume that is just, it's literally black and white. And to me, it looks super boring. And to me, I'm like, I don't know what stands out. I want this to stand out. I want this to stand out. Do you, but it's probably unprofessional to make certain words bold. So
yeah, I mean, if there's certain things you want to highlight, I don't think making it bold is a bad idea. I mean, if you think about it, there's all these stats, right? Like recruiters spend 7 seconds on a resume. In a lot of ways, that's true. And at the same time, I think that number is a little heavy-handed. I mean, I think often what I'll do is I'll make a decision in 7 seconds if I'm going to invest 15 to 30 seconds, right? So it's like I found something here to invest more time into it. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some resumes, if you have the title, that I'm looking for and you came from a brand that I recognize and I respect, it could take me 7 seconds because I'm like, oh, you've been a product manager at Facebook for the last 5 years. Absolutely want to talk to you, right? So like you can do it in 7 seconds if you find what you're looking for. I think the reason why simplicity works is because we spend that finite amount of time on there. So if you make it really, really easy, that actually makes it more effective in a better process for me as a recruiter. So one mistake I see people make all the time is they jam their resume with a bunch of information. And while it's kind of like subconsciously your resume doesn't resonate as well because I'm forced to be like, where's the title? Where's the company? Because it's all on top of each other. So I often recommend to people, try to really create a little bit of white space throughout your resume. It's counterintuitive because you're like, I've got to get it on one page. I've got to put it all in there. I have to show them everything. The reality is your resume should be like a trailer to the movie. Like show me what I need to be like, I need to hear or see more. You don't have to tell me everything you did. You don't have to tell me your entire life story. I just need enough to be like, I'm interested. And you want to create that environment so it's easy for me to skim and find that information.
So
No.
I had a question and then it left me. I so apologize. For someone who is maybe changing careers, they're going from one industry to something completely new.
Yeah.
Do you have advice for people who may be in that situation when it comes to their resume?
I mean, the resume, I'll be honest with you, it is difficult. It really is. So a couple of things, and I've done videos on this recently. So one, a trend that we're kind of seeing collectively across resumes is, recruiters aren't reading those summaries on the top of your resume, right? A lot of times we're not reading them because they're very fluff written. They're generic. There's a lot of cutting and pasting that people do. It doesn't add a lot of value. Now, the sad part about that is I think a really well-written summary section can be extremely valuable, especially if you're trying to change careers. Like this is a great opportunity to say like, I want to take the skills that I have from this industry and apply them to this industry in a better way than that. But you get where I'm going.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge is you should still do that, but know that that's not the silver bullet, if you will, that's going to do it. Again, because we're seeing this trend. I think LinkedIn is a huge opportunity because you have more people's attention on LinkedIn. They're going to spend more time. There's more flexibility. There's less. I wouldn't say there's less fluff, but there's more opportunity, I think. The other part I would say is I changed industries multiple times. I went from non-for-profit to consulting. I went from consulting to tech to like early stage tech is networking, right? Is getting somebody that has worked with you in the past or knows you from school that can vouch that you have these skills. And even though they're from a different industry, they're transferable. And I honestly, between those two things is investing in your LinkedIn profile. Invest in the summary, but recognize that its return on investment is probably pretty low, but really spend the time networking in that sense. It's the easiest path to changing careers or changing industries, I should say.
Absolutely. Because you take out the applicant or the application aspect of it and you put in the human aspect of it back in, you're more likely to go human to human when someone is scrolling and then your content comes up in their feed. So I remembered my question.
Sure.
As far as, your what is a good order to
Mhm.
put on your resume?
Sure.
And and I'm thinking like, do you start with the job title, then the company, and then get
Good question.
into your
Really good
bullet
question.
points? Does that matter?
It doesn't, and we can nitpick a little bit here. I mean, a lot of this stuff is subjective, if you will.
Hmm.
I do think that if you worked for a company that has a strong brand cachet, lead with that, right? So
Okay.
if it's reputable and I know it, and it's gonna, and especially if you're staying in the same industry, all of those things add value, right?
Hmm.
So if somebody has Facebook and I'm recruiting for tech, like that jumps out to me.
Gotcha.
If you don't, if it's a company that's maybe a startup or an earlier stage company, or something that's not well known, lead with the title, right? And again,
Hmm.
this is subjective, and I don't think it's going to matter a huge amount, but there are things to be considered. Again, I think more if you have the brand cachet with the organizations is to lead with those. But that title and that company are the first two things I'm looking at. Have you done this role before, and where have you done it? And that'll allow me a quick decision.
Those are really good considerations. And I'm thinking if I
Yeah,
were in a position where I'm totally changing careers, I may think about leading with the company name.
exactly.
I used to work for the Walt Disney Company, so I may
Right.
lead with that and then
Yep.
say what my role was. And then in my bullet points, make it results driven and talk
You
about
have been watching my videos.
I have been, and I would wanna talk about, like, how my role and how my, like,
Mhm.
results are going
Yep.
to apply to the new role that I'm applying
Yep.
for. S
Exactly.
so let's talk about your resume versus LinkedIn. So I know because I did watch your TikTok,
Yeah.
um, people have asked, what is the difference between my resume and LinkedIn? Isn't LinkedIn just your resume?
Yeah.
And I will say, I I think some people think of LinkedIn as like this boring social media platform that's very passive, and
Yep.
it's not. It's the complete opposite. It's like all these conversations that are constantly happening on your feed,
Yep.
and it is very much the opposite of passive. LinkedIn is a very active social media platform that people should honestly very much take advantage of.
Yeah, and I try to do a lot of that content, especially for young professionals to understand not only. So I think about LinkedIn in two different ways, right? So one is to your question about like what's the difference between resume and LinkedIn. So like even if I take the social networking part out of LinkedIn for a second, like that's a whole separate thing. But your LinkedIn profile and your resume, and how do those differ? Your resume is like the kind of gold standard, if you will, of format of how you apply for a job, right? Like you submit your resume, like that's what we've always done and will continue to do for a long time, probably. The biggest challenge, and I think you've kind of alluded to this, is it's very difficult to utilize your resume in a forward looking way. It's always backwards looking, it's always showing you what I did in the past. And because the summary section has fallen flat, it doesn't allow me a lot of opportunity to show you where I want to go forward. Right.
Mhm.
And so that's the biggest limitation. So when you're changing industries, and that's the thing that's really interesting to me is like, right, like I probably associate as a millennial, though I think I'm like a year off or something like that. But I think that it is a challenge for us to structure a resume that shows where we want to go. So that's why I
Mhm.
think LinkedIn is extremely valuable, because LinkedIn can be your resume. It can be everything that you have in your resume. And if you're looking for a job, it should be a mirror image. But then it allows you this more flexibility to say, like, here's industry news on my featured section. Here's my headline, which talks about like maybe a little bit about what I've done in the past, but like where I want to go and what I've been researching and what I've been studying. And then you've got your cover photo where you can add some kind of brand to it. And your about section, while a lot of people don't take the time to read your about section, I think it gives you a lot more flexibility and a lot more opportunity than your summary does on your resume.
I love
So I
the
think
About Me section.
I do too.
I love reading those actually.
If they're really well written, and the trick is to get, it's almost like marketing. So if you land on somebody's profile, whether you search through them like through the recruiter platform, or somebody said, hey, you should go see my friend's profile, they'd be great for the role you have. When you land on somebody's profile, the about section has like, I think it's like 3 lines that you can see
Mhm.
without clicking see more. You
Yeah.
really need to treat that like a marketing hook, right?
Mhm.
You need to tell me essentially, if I don't click see more, if I don't scroll down, what is the 1 to 2 sentences you told me I would get who you are and the value that you can bring? Value meaning like as a candidate.
Right, and when it comes to those sentences, it's so
Yeah.
important to make them really eye-catching or to make them
Yep.
really intriguing to make me want to click on see more. Do you
Yep.
have any advice on how someone could structure those phrases to make them to optimize their appeal?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a variety of different ways. I mean, some people get like really creative and do like emojis or like, like icons and those kind of things. I think you have to like find your own balance on that. It's funny.
Yeah.
I did a LinkedIn profile review where I talked about the emojis in the about section, and I was like, I love those here. And in the way that this student used it, and like a bunch of people are like, that's unprofessional to have an emoji in your LinkedIn profile. And I was like, if you're not going to hire somebody because they have an emoji in their about section, I don't know if they really want to work for you. Like there's a balance
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, that's very true.
But back to your question, I think the there's a variety of different ways to do it, and I think the 1, 2, kind of 3 things that I like to do is articulate 1 to 2, 3 things. It's like and brand yourself, right? Like I'm an executive recruiter that loves to do X, Y, and Z, and I have expertise in X, Y, and Z, something like that. But giving those 3 things, when you say 3 things to people, it really resonates and sticks with them. So if you left my page and never came back, or you came back a week later, hopefully you remember those 3 things, or I've given you enough of those 3 things that you're like, I want to understand more about what you're talking about, so let me click see more. Yeah, I'm a big fan of 3, by the way. If you notice a lot of my TikToks, there's 3 things that you need to consider.
You know what? I actually didn't notice.
When you hear 3 things, it's psychologically, it seems comfortable to remember. Like you're like, okay, it's only 3 things. I'm in. And it also is enough to keep your attention, and also it very conveniently fits into 1-minute videos very well.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, 1, 2, 3. It's kind of like when you are driving down the side of the road and there's a billboard, you only have like, I don't think it's 30 seconds. I think you only have 3 seconds to understand what it is that they're trying to sell you on that billboard as you're, 70 miles an hour down the road. So it's like, think of your About Me page like that. Think about what would your billboard be?
Exactly.
That should have been the name of this. That should have been the name of this live stream. What would your billboard say?
I mean, I think, and that's in LinkedIn, you have multiple opportunities to do that, right? I think one thing that I found when I started doing all these TikToks was like people weren't utilizing that cover banner, like the one that big banner that's behind your photo, and I was like, that's a huge opportunity. It can be something simple. It could be a color background. It could be a design that kind of speaks to you and how you feel, but it also can be an opportunity to put text in there. And right. I mean, I think mine says, passionate about disrupting the talent space, right? Where it's like, you land on my page and you know that I think about talent acquisition and recruiting very different than most people. And that reflects in the firm that I work for, how I create TikToks and all of those kind of things. But that's a very simple line that if you never scroll past my profile, you at least get a sense of who and how I think about things.
Yeah, yours is really, it's actually graphically very pleasing to the eye. I mean, you've got like this really bold text, passionate about, and then underneath it's like, why the cursive? Why that font in particular? I'm just like kind of curious.
To be honest with you, I think it was a Canva design that I kind of like, or multiple Canva designs that I kind of put into place. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Canva is a lifesaver. And yeah, so I think it was just that. And to be honest with you, I just liked the way it looked, so I just went with it.
Yeah, so that's what I love about Canva. And by the way, you guys, Canva is like, oh gosh. When I was a kid, I think I used to play with like Graphic Artist or something. It's like some really old program on a Windows. But anyway, Canva, it's basically, you can upload your photos, you can put them in different places. It's, this background, your resume versus applicant tracking system.
Yep.
I did this background on Canva, and it's just
I was thinking you probably did. When I saw it,
it's so versatile. But the thing that I really love about it is the templates, because I don't think I'm a graphic designer, and even if I did have like a pretty okay eye, I'm a perfectionist, and I don't want to spend time thinking this font or this font, 1 or 2
exactly.
or 3, I don't have time for that. So yeah, Canva definitely makes it easy. I'm not sponsored by them.
Otherwise, I'm not either. But I will be soon.
We just want to share it with you.
I don't know if Canva is going to sponsor me, because I do often tell people not to use their resume templates because they're not ATS friendly.
Okay. Oh, but
but they're good for they're good for that second resume, right? And I've done a few videos on that where it's like you go here for your ATS template and then go to Canva to get your the one you bring in person, if you will. The other thing about Canva is it's confusing to, I think, to college students or just students in general who are putting their resume together for the first time, because they go to Canva and they see resumes where like your photo is on there, and like in the US, like that is a no, which is ironic because we have a LinkedIn photo and it doesn't make any sense to me, but Canva is a global platform. And so like in the UK, and they don't delineate their resumes by regions. So like in the UK, you absolutely can and probably should have your photo on your resume. And so it's very confusing if you're creating your first resume and people are talking about Canva and you go there and you're like, look at all these great templates, but none of them are ATS friendly, or 95% of them are not ATS friendly.
Well, maybe Canva should do some consulting work with you. They should hire you.
We should do a live stream together. We should just Canva, if you're watching, call me.
Yeah, Canva, call Rob, please. So we talked a little bit about the 7-second resume. And let's just do this. What would your resume be? You for being an adjunct professor, like what would your 7-second resume be?
My 7-second resume be? Wow. That is a great question. You really got me on this one.
I know, right?
There's about 3 different directions I would go, because there's the recruiting side, there's the public speaking side, there's the content creator side. I think there'd probably be something around here's what I'd say. I would say something like, I'm a personal brand expert, right? And if I was given more than 7 seconds, I would tell you that I can help you build your personal brand, whether it be on LinkedIn, whether it be public speaking, whether it be your resume, or how you interview and present yourself in that capacity. But I would call myself a personal brand expert.
Nice.
Or
yeah,
nice
and concise. That's such an interesting challenge. I wonder how other people would do their 7-second resume. And I actually saw a video on YouTube where these students did that, and it was just back to back to back. These students had their resume, in 7 seconds. It's crazy. So then I got to thinking, like, how would I do mine? I don't even know.
It would be like a Vine. Do you remember Vine?
Right?
Vine was like, you know what? We're just going to go into the resume business.
Yeah.
It's going to be Vine resumes.
When you're like, I don't know if it's before a Universal Studios movie or if it's like a when you're in the theater and it's like an ad for Universal, right? And all their content.
Yep.
And it starts off with this music, and they flash different scenes from different movies across the screen, and then it just like it climaxes, and it's like, damn, Universal Studios.
I'm a sucker for montages. I love a good montage.
That's what I would do. I would do a montage. If I could do a 7-second resume, I would do at least 2 seconds of very fast montage, or maybe 3 seconds of flashing a couple like relevant photos across the screen, and then I would say my piece, whatever it is that I would.
If you watch YouTube, and I know I watch a lot of YouTube, content creators on YouTube for my own kind of education, as well as I hope to launch a page after the TikTok page has been successful. If you watch a lot of their trailers, right? Like they come onto YouTube, they do a quick intro, and then there's like cuts to like a 7 to 10 second kind of trailer, like you're talking about. If you watch those individually, you often get a very good sense of what the actual channel is about, right? They do a very good job of taking those 10 seconds or less than 10 seconds, creating what you're talking about and basically educating you what their channel is about. And I think that's a really good education lesson of like, how do you package together whatever it may be that you can bring into that 10 seconds?
Think of your video resume as a Super Bowl ad.
Exactly.
Where 30 seconds costs, $1 million, or I don't even know how much they cost now, but
you're over $1 million.
Yeah, your 7-second resume is a Super Bowl ad. You are the champion, the NFL champions.
You're the MVP.
You're the MVP. So where do you think that video resumes are the future of resumes and the future of job seeking and recruiting?
A loaded question, but the short answer is I think video resumes can be extremely valuable. I think they're a little bit away from being completely like scalable or our markets, across the market. I think there's a massive resistance from old school HR recruiting that it won't work. There's a time constraint. So there's an education part. So as you know, but maybe your listeners don't, I created a video resume platform about a year ago, really tried this idea out where we basically created a very similar, like almost looks like a LinkedIn page. It actually has your resume attached to it. And then it has an up to 2-minute video. And when you send that link to somebody, they get everything, right? They get your resume, they get a LinkedIn kind of experience. And then if they want to click on this video, they get a up to 2-minute video. Where a lot of HR and recruiters will tell you is we don't have time to watch videos. And I agree with them on that. Where I think the video part can be interesting is if you take those 10,000 resumes from Google, right? And I get all these resumes, I put them through the ATS I get them down to a short list of, resumes or people that I want to talk to. Before I get on a call with them, then I watch the video. And I save myself, in theory, some time where here's what happens all the time. I get a call with people. It's kind of standard issue 30-minute phone call. I often know in the first 10 minutes if this is going to end up being a good thing or not. And then I have to kind of fake a call for the next 10 to 20 minutes, even though I probably made up my mind. And so if we can alleviate some of that, where, again, I review your resume in 10 seconds, I make a decision, but before I call you, I watch the video and then I assess a little bit more. Do I want to have a call with you? And I think that's where it's going to add a lot of value. I think also video resumes are really great if you're networking, if you're being referred, if you're cold reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn to introduce yourself. Like, video is an amazing way to kind of stand out. But today, I think if you're applying through the application tracking system and you want to include your video resume, it has less value in that sense.
Right. So it sounds like video resumes are more applicable when you post them on LinkedIn as of right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And they should be a supplement, right? So it's funny, when we had the platform, we had to call it a video resume platform because that's what people search. But to me, it's almost like a video cover letter, right? Like it supplements to the resume. It's like, here's my resume, which has all the data and the bullet points and whatnot. But here's my story, right? Here's my trailer. Here's my 30 seconds of why we should have a conversation. And that's actually a lot of times different than your resume. You may include a line or two about who you are and the experience that you bring, but it's your passion, it's your communication skills, it's your creativity that makes those interesting. So when we launched the platform, we had people in the middle, like in the beginning of COVID, like when people were losing their jobs, we had people that created really good videos on their phones and were getting jobs in like 30 days. And
That's
like,
amazing.
we're talking when people were getting furloughed and let go left and right. And so it can work. It just needs to be the right one. It has to be the right video. And don't get me wrong, not everyone's great on video. That's the other challenge of this, is that a lot of people are uncomfortable on video. So you have the candidate side, that's one, and then the other side of people. But I think about one woman that I was working with, and she sent it to, she was interviewing with an earlier stage healthcare company, and the CEO saw her video and loved it. And he was like, I felt like I already knew you before you came in the room. I loved hearing your story. It gave me a lot of education, and it was great. Sorry, my dog is asking me.
It's okay. What do you think about Clubhouse?
Yeah, I just got onto Clubhouse, but man, it is fascinating. And the simplicity of it is so amazing to me. I mean, it's literally like, I hear my parents talk about, what do they used to call it? The party line, which is like where you, like, all the phones were like hooked up and you just pick up and listen to your neighbor's conversation. Like, that's kind of what it's like. You're just like jumping from conference call to conference call. But it's fascinating. I mean, to have access to people, like, I've been listening to Gary Vee lately, like, to have live access to Gary Vee, that's kind of unheard of. So yeah, I'm a big fan. The simplicity of it to me is fascinating. I think it's going to go, I mean, it's at $1 billion valuation. I don't know if it's going to go, I don't know if that's too high, but I think it's amazing.
It's such a great lead generator because you can't hide behind anything. You can't hide behind any photos or videos or copy. You can't hide behind any of that stuff. It's just you and your voice, and there's not even any history that people can look at unless they leave the app and look at your Instagram or your Twitter. They have to leave the app though. That's, like, there's no history stored on your app. So any conversation you've had in a room, that's it. Once that conversation
happens, it's over.
Once it leaves your breath, that's it, So it is very interesting to me.
It's jumping on the, like, also like the podcast kind of like train, right? I mean, it's in a lot of ways, I think it's going to help not replace it, but like augment the podcast. Meaning, like, I can be doing work and like I just put it on and like listen to it in the background, right? And like, so you can very passively be involved in it, which I think is also very interesting. And it's easy to like multitask it, right? Like, I can't scroll through TikTok and do email, right? But I can be listening to Gary Vee and a group of other content creators talking about how they're scaling content while I'm writing my emails. And so I think also so you're going to get adoption in a different way than you do from all of these other social media apps that are very visual based and are kind of distracting in that sense.
Yeah. And, like I said, with lead generation, even if you're not in a position to gain clients, maybe you don't own your own business, but if you are, in a room as an instructor, I can tell where my students are at based on the questions that they ask.
Sure.
So based on like your questions that you may have in the Clubhouse app in one of those rooms, or based on your response to something, can really tell, it can really reveal a lot about you to all the other people in that room. So, if you're not there for lead generation, it is a heck of a great app for networking,
Totally
on
agree.
top of LinkedIn.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as I think about like this year, the kind of probably 4 platforms that I'll lean into are obviously TikTok, which is my largest audience, LinkedIn being my second audience. We'll build YouTube, and I think Clubhouse is probably the fourth where I will invest a lot of time for all of the reasons you just mentioned. LinkedIn's interesting to me. I mean, LinkedIn fits obviously to my content, right? And I do a lot of content on LinkedIn. The reason why I haven't invested in LinkedIn as much though personally is because it's a very saturated market, right? So like a lot of people are talking about resumes and interviewing and all that kind of stuff. And I think it became kind of like a lot of white noise for me. Whereas TikTok was like, there's a handful of us talking about this stuff. And so we get an opportunity to kind of stand out. And the other thing I would say is LinkedIn, I think don't get me wrong, I love it, but I think it's going to very soon have the average age is like 42 on LinkedIn or 41 or something like that. And so like the millennial audience or the Gen Z audience isn't quite adopted into it. And so I think they need to make a really conscious effort. And I think they are. I mean, they release stories, which just came out recently for a lot of people. And they're making an effort. And I think they need to continue doing that. I sometimes think LinkedIn's going to have the Facebook challenge, right? Where it's being considered like your parents' platform. And we need to like make sure that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. So how can students stand out when they're applying for jobs, whether it's a high school student going for their first job or a college graduate who, is now, they got their degree and they're ready to try to enter the workforce in the field that they studied. So what kind of advice do you have specifically for students and entry-level applicants?
Yeah, for high school, I think if you're applying for your first job, and I mean, so one, here, let me take one step back. So I often tell high school students that like there's kind of like 3 to 4 components I think you should have on your resume as you're going into college. The first one is obviously your education, right? So just having your, a strong GPA, which is certainly going to help. Number 2 is actually getting a job. And it doesn't matter what the job is. Like it could be literally bagging groceries, but like there is something to be said about going out and getting a job, showing up every day or every day that you're supposed to work, right? And that job can be, I mean, my first job in high school was 2 days a week, right? It was a Tuesday afternoons and Saturdays, right? Bagging groceries. But like it showed that I took the initiative to get a job. Number 2 is I would say is actually get some kind of internship. And that is a big word. Often it seems daunting to high school students, but I think that's almost like volunteering in some ways. Like there are ways that you can go and find opportunities to work for free, but get some education out of it. For me, I went to a local TV station, like a really like local TV station, like the one like only your grandparents watched,
Yeah.
and like, everybody there was like some kind of volunteer or like, whatever. But I got to work on a live show every Tuesday for 2 years and I learned a ton. And I didn't get paid for it, but on my resume was, internship at a TV station. And so that's obviously an extreme example, but I think you can find ways to build an internship or create something like that. I think volunteering or then having some other activity. Activity can be a sport, it can be an instrument, whatever it may be, but like start your own club. If you like video games, start a video game club. But like show that you created something or you took the initiative to build something or be part of something. And I think if you can go into if you have a high school resume that has a part-time job, some kind of internship, it could be like a summer one, and then an activity, a club, a sport, or something like that. Like that to me is a trifecta that's going to stand out to you when you're going to college. And I think college is then actually repeatable. I think it's very similar at an elevated degree, right? Bigger internships, whatever it may be, but essentially the same thing. And I think that's, there's a lot of emphasis on internships, and I think there should be, but those to me are not the end all be all. I think having that first job in college and in high school is super important.
Yeah, and you know what? Even with those volunteer opportunities, I believe with high school students, they're required to have a certain amount of volunteer hours in order to graduate.
Yeah.
So, even if you don't have a job that taxes get taken out of, you can still put that volunteer work on your resume. And, the bullet points that you put underneath it should still be results driven and should still share how you contributed, either how you contributed to what you were a part of, or if you built something on your own, then, big results right there. First of all, you've built something that didn't exist before. So, But those are definitely some things to keep in mind if you are a high school student and also if you are a college graduate
Yep.
or still in
My,
college.
my first job, I mentioned before, my first job in high school was bagging groceries, and I got it because I went grocery shopping with my mother every Tuesday. I was 15 years old. I went grocery shopping with her every Tuesday, and every Tuesday I applied. I would literally write, and it was like an
Yeah.
application. They would like hand me an application, and I would have to write it out while she grocery shopped, and I would hand it to the guy. And he's like, I don't know, I don't know. And he's like, I gotta appreciate your gusto. And I did it for 6 weeks in a row, and he finally gave me a job.
Wow. That is, you know what? That is really good. You know, they say the squeaky wheel gets the
Yeah,
grease.
yeah. He
I
was like, all right, fine. Like, I'll give you this job. Great.
Do you think I'm sure some people would be afraid of annoying the
Yeah,
supervisor or the manager by doing that. So,
yeah,
do you think I mean, you got the job with that tactic. So,
yeah.
what do you have to say to people who may be hesitant to use that tactic?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're constantly just waiting for something to happen, then I think it might. But I think there is a lot more control. I felt a lot more empowered and controlled by going in there every Tuesday and saying I'm going to do this, right? And I think like if it fails, it fails, but it fails on my terms, right? Like meaning like I gave it everything I had. I went
Yeah.
every time, as opposed to being like, what if? What if I didn't? What if I should I have applied again? Right. So I think, don't get me wrong, at 15, I wasn't thinking that way. I wasn't
Yeah.
like, I'm going to do this on my terms. But I do think there is something subconsciously about the idea that I was driven to get a job and I wanted to contribute. And I felt like if I just kept pushing and kept asking, eventually somebody would at least listen. And that's essentially what happened.
So, we have talked on Industry Explorers, we've talked about results driven
Yeah.
resumes, and we've talked
Mhm.
about how people in the entertainment industry can translate what they've done into
Yeah.
corporate speak, or
Sure.
not even corporate speak, but just other
Yeah.
industry speak, and how what you did day to day, how we can translate your job functions into results, you
Yeah.
know. But I would be so curious to actually maybe do another live stream with you where we talk about that same concept, but for high
Yeah.
school students. What if you're an actor and in the
Hmm.
drama club?
Yeah.
Okay, are you directly involved with ticket sales? Like, did you increase your high school ticket
There
sales
you
by
go.
50%? Well, maybe you did because maybe you went out to the community and you got people to purchase tickets from you, in which case that's an
Exactly.
amazing result to put on your resume. Maybe you are a linebacker for the high school football team and you
Yeah.
guys had a really great year.
Yeah.
There's oh my god, sports is full of statistics. I know nothing about sports statistics, but that's another great example of results that you can put on your resume based on
Yeah.
a high school activity.
I mean, I think also like there's I think sometimes even like qualitative. I think like
Mhm.
what I often tell people is like take the activity that you're talking about and write down what does success look like if you did that right. Right. So if you think the idea about acting, right? It's like we delivered on a new, performance
Mhm.
in a I'm making this up here, but we delivered on a performance in a truncated timeline, with positive feedback from the organization and the audience. Right. And so like
It.
I mean, I'm stretching here a little bit, but my point is like when you put on the performance, what does success look like, right? It's people
Mhm.
show up and they give you praise and feedback. Okay, let's back into it and then do that. And so I think a lot of times when we talk about results driven, people want, and if you can quantify it, that's always good. But if you can't quantify it, it's what does success look like? Is it your boss is happy? Is it the manager gives you feedback? Is it the customer is happy? Is it the customer comes back? And so starting to think about it that way, as opposed
Yeah.
to I need a number or I need a tangible thing to put on there. A lot of times it's like delivered quality customer service. Like that's it. I delivered quality customer service, and that is driven in a bunch of different ways, but it doesn't have to
Mhm.
be quantifiable.
Yeah, and if it's not quantifiable and you're
Yeah.
making it qualitative, it doesn't
Yep.
have to be like and I was a band kid when I was in high school. So
Nice.
we had our marching band competitions, and at the end of the season, the schools in your division do one last hurrah and then you're ranked, right? So
Sure.
even if you're not ranked or if you went from 10th place to 7th place overall, from
Yep.
one year to the other, what you could focus on are your processes. You
Yep.
know, so it's not just about, oh, we got 10th place. No, it's not first place. It's, you know, you can focus on, okay, well, what were you doing during practice?
Yep.
What did you do to change what you guys were doing before and improving your processes, thereby improving your performance? And
Yep.
that applies with any other club. Marching band's just near and dear to my heart, and that was the first thing I thought of.
My college roommate, my freshman college roommate, was in the band.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Well, I'm so grateful that you've given us your time and
Appreciate
your
it.
executive advice. So, do you have any last minute advice for anybody who is thinking about what they should do with their resume, who's thinking about getting a next job, maybe
Yeah.
transitioning? There's so many different scenarios that warrant different advice, but do you have any last minute words of wisdom for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think really focusing on that ATS friendly resume and doing your research, whether it's watching my channel or Googling and watching YouTube, whatever it may be, but really doing the research and understanding what that looks like so that you can give your best attempt and not get, the worst part is when you apply to something and you know that you're qualified or you know that you could be a good fit. And then, you ultimately get dinged because of an ATS. So certainly doing your due diligence on that part, I think, is number one. Number two is, again, building your LinkedIn profile so you actually have a brand out there. And a brand is a big word, but giving yourself the chance to kind of talk to the market and say what you are all about and what's the value that you can bring. And then number three, I would say, is really is networking and building relationships with people. And that can come in a multitude of different ways, whether it's former colleagues or students. I've had professors refer me to roles. And so I think there's an opportunity there to really think about your foundation of what your network looks like and start to really invest in that. And that's a long-term strategy. I think a lot of times you see TikToks and YouTubes and people are like, you should, you should get, referrals and network. And those don't happen overnight. They're not silver bullets, but they are things that if you invest over time can be extremely valuable on both sides. You can help somebody else with their job down the line, and in return, somebody can help you. So I think those three things are probably the biggest core that I would recommend.
Thank you for driving it home for us. It was such a pleasure having you. And
Thanks so much.
everybody, explorers, if you follow Rob Cancilla on LinkedIn, and he is also on TikTok. You have how many followers now? It's a lot.
140,000. Yeah.
Let's help him. Let's help
Gotten
him
pretty
get
good.
to 200,000. Not, I don't even have that kind of audience reach right now, but it's someday, I promise. But if you are on TikTok, follow Rob on TikTok at Rob_Cancilla. And once again, please subscribe to Industry Explorers because I am here to help you guys no matter what your situation may be. And until next time, I will see you guys on our next adventure. Take care, everyone.